Welcome to the Election University podcast, a weekly show where we hear from industry experts who share tips and tricks for winning campaigns. Whether you're running for office now, thinking about it for the future, or just want to know more about campaigns and elections, Election University is for you. With Election University, click, learn, win. And now your host, Jason Bennett and Rainey Cohen.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks for tuning in on another episode of Election University Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Bennett.
I'm Rainey Cohen.
Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we are trekking out to Arkansas to talk with a spectacular candidate who's running for the state house there. Yeah. Gayatri Agnew.
She seems super awesome. She is a mom, a business leader, and lifelong advocate for opportunity. She lives with her husband, Ryan, and their two kids in Bentonville, Arkansas. Gayatri works for a major corporate foundation, and prior to her current role, she worked in the public and private sectors focusing on education and economic development. She says she's passionate about building relationships and creating strong communities, and is a proud community college alum and former community college trustee.
Yeah, so she is fantastic, and we know her through our work at the Institute for a Democratic Future, which is a young adult civics program for young adults ages 21 to 36, 6-month civics program where we teach young adults about politics. And Gayatri was one of our class fellows back in the 2002 timeframe.
Yeah, way back machine.
Yeah, remember those days? How quaint those days were. So we're excited to talk to her today. She's, hanging it out and running for State House, and I'm very excited to be talking with her today. We're going to be doing these case studies with candidates who are running for office periodically where we check in with them halfway through their campaign or at some point during the campaign in the middle. We've done some reviews, some look backs on campaigns where we are talking about, what they would have done differently and what obstacles that they overcame to win or lose their seats. And in this particular case, we wanted to do something that was in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And she's graciously...
she's like in the fire right now.
I know.
And then she was like, yes, of course, I'll take time to talk to you.
I know, exactly. Which is very generous of her time. So we're very fortunate to have her today. So let's not put it off any longer. Gayatri, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. My pleasure, Jason.
We read off a very brief bio in the intro, and we wanted to talk a bit more about what motivated you to run for this position. What drew you to get politically involved? Why are you running for this office, and what you're running on?
Sure. So I was in Bentonville, and I'm running for the state house. And the reason I'm running is pretty simple. I have two kids. My husband and I are raising our son, Rohan, and our daughter, Kamala, here in the area. And we love this community. We love living here. We love raising our kids here. But there's a lot of small things about our community that could be better, that could be easier, and that could make life a little easier for the families that live here. To take a specific example, roads, our transportation and infrastructure can be challenging as our region is growing. Jobs, we need a more diverse economy so people have and can maintain economic security for their families. And schools. We have amazing schools in Bentonville. They're some of the best in the state of Arkansas, but I'd love to see them be some of the best in the world. So roads, jobs, and schools, it's really that simple because local politics is pretty simple. It's about doing stuff that makes every day easier for busy families. That's why I'm running.
Awesome. So I think one of the things that we're the most curious about is how's it going? We're parachuting. Yeah, we're parachuting in to this campaign in the middle of it. And thank you again. We can't thank you enough for taking time out of a busy campaign schedule to record with us. We are, so enthusiastic to hear how it's going. So thank you for that. But give us a day in the life.
Absolutely. It's going really well. And I know that might be sort of a quick and cliche answer. But we are 126 days out from November 6th. And plenty could be going really wrong. So I'm really proud to say it's going really well. And what I mean by that is I'm working through the skill of how to be in three places at once and have hired an incredible team to help with the race, which is helping me be able to do that. I have gotten over my phobia of walking up to strangers' doors and knocking on them. And I have gotten over my phobia of calling dear friends and saying, hi, this is Gayatri. I'm running for office. Can I have your money?
Yeah.
And so I think being on the other side of the how do I staff my campaign as a busy working mom, how do I find time to get out and knock doors, and how do I make sure I can raise the resources my campaign will need to be successful are kind of the three biggest hurdles to climb in this phase of the campaign. And I feel like we are actively working on all three, and I feel really good about them.
Sounds like it's a well-oiled machine at this point.
It is becoming a well-oiled machine. I mean, The magical thing about a political campaign, as I know you both know really well, is it's not a machine at all. It's a bunch of people. And because it's people, I think that inherently introduces an enormous amount of complexity because people have emotion and need and lots of responsibilities. And so it is a well-oiled machine, but it is also a political campaign, which means it's full of ups and downs and incredible highs and incredible lows. But at least right now, I feel really good about the team that I have. I feel really encouraged by the volunteers that are coming out of the woodwork to sign up, to help, to knock doors, to make calls, to write postcards. And I feel energized and excited by the support of my family. So I think we're in a good spot, but we've got a lot of days to go.
I think the thing that I'm the most curious about is what the political landscape is like. I am a born and raised Pacific Northwest inside the blue bubble kind of Democrat. And so for me, and I'm not very familiar, I haven't spent much time in the South. So for me, when I think about a Democrat running for office in Arkansas, my first question is, how's that going? And what is the landscape like, for the makeup of the state house and then maybe who your opponent is?
So the demographics in the district. If I had been evaluating running in this district prior to 2016, I'm not sure I would have had the chutzpah, for lack of a better word, to do it. Because Trump carried this district by 70%. And the last time a Democrat ran was in 2014. So there's no data analysis you can do of this district and not go, whew. And in fact, what was interesting was when I was debating if I wanted to get into this race and I was calling friends, many of whom are fairly political, given that I've worked political campaigns in my early professional career, and they'd say, where are you thinking about running? And I'd give them the district and the district number, and they'd do what any good political person would do, and they'd pull up the data, and every time you just hear this like on the other end of the line. And a few of those calls were discouraging, but then those calls started to get motivating because I thought, okay, if everybody says either it can't be done, it's unlikely it will be successful, or you shouldn't do it, no one will do it, right? And so at some point in red states, folks just have to say, I'm going to do it anyway. And have to say, not only am I going to do it anyway, but I'm going to do it with enormous gusto, and I'm going to do it with pride, and I'm going to do it because I know there are a lot of people in my community who share my values. And those aren't partisan values. Those are values based on the kind of community I want for my family and the other families in Bentonville. And so I think getting past the partisan divide of a red state and a red district has been hard for me. But I think how I've done it is to talk to voters and to really ask, like, what influences your voting choices? And to say, do you want to make sure your kids are taken care of? Do you want to make sure our schools are good? Do you want to make sure that our roads will help you get where you need to be on time? And folks are like, yes, those are the things that I want. And then I quickly pivot to, well, those are the things that I want too. And I'm running this fall, but by the way, there's a D after my name. And I think I can get folks there if I opened the conversation with, hi, my name is Gayatri and I am running as a Democrat. I would just see the backside of a lot of doors.
Right.
And so I think, I think the experience I've had and the advice I would give is that it's very easy. And I grew up in California, so I can say this. It's very easy on the coast to think that it is party first, or to think that everyone else agrees with you through a partisan lens. But in Arkansas, it's absolutely not a partisan lens. It's an issues lens. It's a what do you want for your family and what do you value? And so I'm proud to be running as a consensus builder and as someone who's willing to listen and talk to my voters and represent them well. I also happen to be running as a Democrat, but I can't. It's like you can't lead with the Democratic badge because you won't be successful. And it's authentically not how I identify. I will say just briefly that as I was exploring running, I had a number of local community leaders ask me to consider running as an independent. And I thought that was really interesting. And I said, why? And they said, well, I don't think this region's going to elect a Democrat, and we really want to see you successful. And I really pushed on that. I said, I'm not running this race to have the conversation about a two-party system in this democracy. And I think running as an independent would distract from the issues. So I decided to run as a Democrat. But even just that was where I was pushed as I was exploring running, I find to be kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, that is. And so let's talk a little more about the makeup of the House of Reps. So what does it look like right now in terms of D versus R, women? How's the gender breakup? Are there people of color in office?
So there are 100 seats in the Arkansas State House, and 24 of them are held by Democrats. Of those Democrats, 3 of them are women, and of those women, one of them is a woman of color.
Wow.
Is she the only person of color?
She is not the only person of color. Okay. She is not. But if elected, I would be able to double the total number of Democratic women of color in the Arkansas State House.
Yeah.
So, I think where you're going with this question is what are the demographics of our state house and how do they compare to the demographics of the state of Arkansas?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a tired phrase to simply just say that it's male, pale, and stale. And I've used that term a lot on the campaign, and I don't mean it in any kind of disparaging way. I am all for older white men being in elected office. I support it. I think that, they've earned that right. In a lot of cases, they're wonderful community leaders. But I do have a problem with only old white men being in elected office.
Right.
And I think what you see in the Arkansas State House is an extreme underrepresentation, even just of women. Interestingly enough, the state of Arkansas is actually a majority female, as frankly is the country, but is a majority female state. My district has a higher percentage of women living in it than men, and yet we are only 18% of the entire Arkansas state legislature. And that just feels off, and I'm not on the phone as a radical feminist saying that, women legislate better than men. That's not it at all. But women do legislate differently than men. And I think we do need more women in the Arkansas State House to see this state move in the right direction.
That's great. That statement is great, not the makeup.
Right.
Makeup's not great. Let's change that makeup.
But hey, it's motivating. It's hugely motivating to me. I come home from my double duty, meaning I go to my first job and then I go to my second job, meaning the campaign.
Yeah.
And then I go home and I see my daughter and I think to myself, like, what is it that I want for her? And I want her to know that if she wants to grow up to be a legislator, if she wants to grow up to be president, that's exactly what she should be able to do. And in order to believe that she can do that, she needs to see role models do that.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
You had mentioned a few minutes ago that 2 years ago you wouldn't have considered running for this seat or would have been like tremendously more difficult. Are Democrats in Arkansas in general, do you think, having an easier time relating to the constituency? Or like, how are Democrats doing in general?
So I think that the Democratic message right now, particularly a message around opportunity, around taking care of each other, around building strong communities, around tolerance and inclusion, I think those messages are particularly resonant right now, especially in a state that, keep in mind, while Arkansas may be quite bright red right now, this is the state of Bill Clinton, and this is a very purple state historically. And it's a state that holds a high level of value to both Christian faith values and to strong community. And I just think the misalignment right now between some of the things that are happening predominantly at the national level, but also in our state legislature, are just so misaligned to the values that the majority of people here have, that it is a new and interesting time for Democrats here. That being said, I don't think that the Democratic Party. So it's interesting. Like there's an opportunity right now that's occurring, and I don't think that the state party here, or frankly, state parties almost anywhere in the central part of the country, were ready for the opportunity that's come. Mm-hmm. Right. So we're running more candidates in Northwest Arkansas than have probably run in the last 20 years, meaning we're challenging seats that have gone unchallenged for years and years. And I think the state party here knew how to operate, and the state party here knew how to run candidates. But running a candidate in a seat you expect to lose is a very different kind of race than running and supporting a candidate who truly has the potential to win, even though the numbers tell you something different. And so I don't know if any state parties in the country are really ready for that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we flipped 44 legislative districts right now in special elections across the country.
I call those special elections, Jason, my seeds of hope. And I'm not even kidding you. I know it sounds silly, but because every time you see one flip, right? Like if we took the last sort of 2 years just off the table and you said there was a district in which a Republican president won 70% of the vote, is it winnable by a Democrat come that fall? You'd just giggle. You'd be like, of course not.
Right.
So why is it actually in play this year? What's different? And I just find that to be fascinating, but you can't ignore 44 special elections and say it's not possible. It's absolutely possible.
And some of those districts that have flipped are similar in makeup, I'm assuming, to what you're facing as well. They weren't all just, 50-50 districts. Some of these were pretty red. The one in Wisconsin, I think, Trump won by 30 points, 40 points
Missouri
or something.
Got a close eye on some of those.
Yeah.
I mean, they are similar demographics to the demographics in my district.
Yeah. So what are you hearing at the door? Do you feel that the Democrats are having an opportunity here? Are you feeling it with the voters that they're hungry for change? What's your sense? What on the ground evidence are you feeling to support your seeds of hope?
So the special elections are giving me seeds of hope. And some of my conversations at the doors renew that hope. But I think the biggest challenge that I'm walking into, the biggest challenge I would argue that just about any candidate is walking into this fall is apathy. And I know there's been a surge of engagement, of involvement, of motivation. But it's been, I'll just use the Parkland students as an example, which is a movement I found enormously inspiring. At the same time, we know that 18 to 24-year-olds have the lowest numbers of voter turnout. And even when you see folks marching and engaged and motivated, that doesn't always translate into actually showing up to vote. And so I think the biggest opportunity, not just before Democrats, but before our nation this fall, is a question of voter engagement and a question of how we overcome the general apathy that engaging in the political process doesn't matter. And I don't think there's a time in my life when there's been a bigger falsehood that could be out there, right? I struggle to understand how anyone can read a newspaper today and not understand how critical our elections are to preserving and protecting the future of our democracy. And yet, as I go to doors or, last night at the 4th of July festival in town, I went out and I registered voters. And I would start by saying, excuse me, are you registered to vote? And I had a handful of folks look me straight in the eye and say no. And I said, do you want to be? And they said no. And, so that's a long road to get from someone who's saying, no, I'm not registered, and no, I don't want to be registered,
right,
to, can we change the electoral makeup come fall? Because the only way you can do that is getting people to show up and vote. And so, my hope for this district where I'm running more so than anything else is to see voter registrations rise of eligible voters, and secondly, to see voter turnout rise. I also hope I win, but the metrics I want to move more than anything, because I think they're the metrics that ultimately enable and build a strong and healthy community, is voter turnout. And just to give you some perspective, we had our primary election on May 22nd, and my opponent, the incumbent, did have a primary challenger, and he came very close, frankly, to losing his primary, but there were less than 2,200 people who voted in the election.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like 200 votes or something, right? That separated the two of them?
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right.
So for our listeners who are thinking about running for office and they're in the planning stages right now, what is your best advice for them?
Couple of things. First of all, and no knock to your profession on this, Jason, but I don't think that planning to run for office is the right way to think about it. I think that being engaged in your community and understanding how you can make impact is the right way to think about it. So I wasn't planning to run for office. I didn't move to Arkansas to run for office. I was recruited by a company here. I'm thrilled to be living here, but I actually thought my political days were in the rearview mirror. And I looked around. I looked at the life I was living. I looked at the opportunities that my kids had. I looked at the opportunities that a family with equal potential but not quite the same access to early learning or to schools or to work had. And it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right, and I knew I could do something about it. So I really feel like the choice to run is in part rising to the opportunity put in front of you and being willing to say yes. But very tangibly, if we can get past the philosophical, should you wake up one day and say, I'm going to run, or should you sort of be called by your community and be needed? I do think the issues should drive your engagement. If you are not motivated by issues you know are going to matter and make change in your community, there's no way you can put in these hours. Like, there's no way that just the motivation to be an elected official would ever sustain the schedule that I've been keeping.
Yeah.
It's got to be bigger than that. And for me, it absolutely is. I think the second skill to master is to be in three places at once. I mentioned that before. I really mean that. It's an art form. And I think the third thing that I guess I would say is to cultivate relationships. It is a lot harder to ask people for help when the only reason you're coming to them is that you're running. It is a lot easier to be engaged and involved and active in your community and then decide to run and turn around to the people you've been working with and say, I'm going to run. Will you help me?
Right. Yeah. That is a big difference. So on the being three places at once, what are you doing to manage that? It sounds that this
I feel like you're really asking me for trade secrets. That's like behind the scenes, a day in the life. Okay, I'll give them to you.
Yes.
I'll give them to you.
Let us in. Pull the curtain.
So first of all, I mean, not to get a little cliche, but like let's go back to the basics, right? Like, what does it take to run for elected office? It takes three things: time, money, and people. However you want to sort of slice and dice that. And so I knew when I signed up to run and maintain the full-time job that I have, that I needed more people power than I alone could bring, right? I have colleagues who are running in neighbor districts who, are either retired or who are not working full-time, right? They can make very different staffing choices than I can because I'm at work all day, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So I need to be able to use those hours for the campaign. I just can't do it myself. And so the first thing that I did was hire the most fantastic campaign manager anywhere in the U.S. Miss Chelsea Miller is running my campaign. And one of the ways that I knew she was fantastic was actually, this is for real. I sent her a link to your podcast right after it started. And I said, hey, Chelsea, there's this new program, Election University. You should check it out. And within like an hour, she wrote me back and was like, I'm already halfway through the first episode. So I knew she.
We didn't even set you up. We didn't even set you up for that.
Right.
No. That's like truly not a setup. But I think what's interesting is that as much as I've talked about, it's about rolling up your sleeves and being involved in your community and doing the right thing. Politics is about all those things, but there's also a science to it, and it's hard. And knowing the mechanics of how to run a good campaign is a critical ingredient to success. And programs like yours, training initiatives that we're starting to see pop up here and there, I think are enabling folks whose motivations are right, but whose tools and resources are just maybe absent, right? If you've never been around the political process and you decide to run for office, that's hard. That's hard work. And it's hard to learn what you need to know, and harder yet to learn, what you don't know or you may not know to ask about. So anyway, hire well is the first ingredient to success of being in multiple places at once. The second thing is leverage your digital platforms, right? So I actually had a great moment where I was in a meeting at work and my boss looks across the table at me, like interrupts the meeting, and she's like, you just sent me an email. And I got really nervous for a second, and I was like, what? And then I went, oh, no, my campaign sent you an email, meaning my campaign manager, right? And so, like, literally I was in two places at once because the digital technology that we have today allows me to do that. And you have to be able to do that. And then I think it's just how do you, highest and best use of your time. When we started the campaign, I wanted to be everywhere. I wanted to go to all the community events. I wanted to do all this stuff, but you quickly realize that if you're going to work your field and finance plan, if you're going to knock the doors you need to knock by November 6th, you can't just push moves at community events because you're not going to get your voter IDs done, and you're not going to have your conversations, and you're not going to be convincing voters. So I think, frankly, it's not the fun stuff that the candidate gets to do. It's knock doors, make phone calls, and keep your entire campaign team and yourself motivated. But if you can stay focused and sort of eye on the prize and run a diligent campaign, I think you can move the needle anywhere, including Arkansas.
That's great. Let's talk about fundraising. How's it been going, and what are the challenges that you're facing right now?
It's going really well. It's hard. Raising money in politics is hard. And I think one of the hardest parts is that, people will give to their church, people will give to nonprofits in a way that most Americans don't give to political campaigns.
Right.
It's just not as much in our ethos of how we think about supporting strong community. And so I've had some tough phone calls. I've even called friends, who are like, how much do you want me to give? And bless my dear friends, like they've all given, but for a lot of them, it's the first time they've ever made a political campaign donation. And so while I may have asked them for $250 and gotten $50, and don't get me wrong, I'll take that $50, but they're not conditioned to do political giving. And so I think for first-time candidates like myself, that's the hardest part, because you anticipate, you know someone's sort of background or means, and you think, and they've known me for years, I'll be able to have them really support me. And some of them absolutely do. Some of my friends have been incredibly generous. But some have just not necessarily understood that I can't win without money, that I can't run a successful campaign if I don't have the resources I need. What has been really incredible was that I've been able to call donors who are more sort of conditioned to give, folks that have stronger giving histories, and they've given without batting an eye. They've said, tell me about your race, tell me about yourself, why do you think you can win? And they've invested in my campaign. And so I think once I started seeing strangers, people I had never met, and sometimes even people I had never talked to, that read about the campaign or heard about me or had a friend tell them about me, being willing to give me their money, that's humbling and inspiring and motivating, right? So fundraising is going well, but when I say well, don't hear that as anything other than I'm working my tail off on it. But I'm being able to raise money, and that's a big part of the puzzle.
Well, it sounds like you have been really successful at the doors and in the community talking with voters. Are you getting support, including money, from any sort of like surprising place?
It's a good question. Yes, I've actually been really pleasantly surprised. You hear the phrase, all politics is local. You hear, it's about face-to-face conversation. And I think in this day and age of electronic devices being what they are, and, I'm the worst with Twitter, Facebook, all the rest of it, it's very easy to become pessimistic about those statements. But what I've observed is that an in-person human conversation goes a really long way. And, I've had plenty of folks tell me to my face they're not going to vote for me, but I've also had a ton of folks tell me that they are. And I've had other folks tell me, well, you know what, maybe I won't vote for the other guy. And so, like, you got to take your wins where you can find them, right? I just need to get 50% plus one. So if I can get that one guy to stay home because he thought I was an interesting person, and that other gal or guy to actually show up at the polls and to support me, that's what I need to be able to do. But, again, I think folks have been receptive to my message because I'm not coming out of the gate with partisan ideology, nor am I running with it. I really believe it's about putting my community first. It's about doing what Bentonville needs. And I have the advantage that my opponent's enormously partisan, right? That he's both run a really partisan campaign and been a really partisan legislator. He sort of holds the flag for the conservative flank of the Republican Party in this state. And that's made it easier for moderate Republicans to look at me and say, hey, listen, I've been a lifelong Republican, but our values are aligned and I want to see you represent my district. And so, yes, I do think we've been successful in having some good conversations. But I think part of that success is truly just because our message is resonating with where people's minds and hearts are at right now.
Do you and your opponent get along? Like, can you see each other in public and shake hands and have a conversation? Or is there like tension there?
We are not close friends. Probably not any, team bonding activities in our
no trust
together.
falls.
So the primary challenger of the incumbent and I are quite good friends. And we met on the campaign trail, which is an odd way to make a friend, especially when he's your potential future opponent. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also the most special thing about American democracy, which is that it's safe for me to get to know my opponent. It's okay for us to become friends, for us to talk about the issues. Unfortunately, however you put it, he wasn't successful in the primary. And so Jim, my opponent, and I have spent very little time together. I will say the one question that he asked me the first time we met, which was actually at the Arkansas State House when I went down to Little Rock to file to run, I think it's just really telling. And we introduced ourselves to one another, and then he looked at me and he said, "Why are you running in my district?"
Oh.
And I was very sort of flustered, but I had the good sense to look back at him and to say, Jim, it's my district too. And I think that what scares me most about what's happening in our political process right now is when anyone, Republican or Democrat, gives up on advocating for a seat because it is perceived to be quote unquote safe. I just think like the whole idea of democracy is about discourse and conversation and competition. And the second that a politician runs away from or doesn't want to engage in that conversation, we start to lose a piece of our democracy. So I would be happy to spend more time with Jim. We haven't seen each other much on the campaign trail. And like I said, I can't say as we're friends, but I'm very open to becoming friends with him. And I hope that we get ample time through the fall to talk to one another about the issues and how we see the opportunities before us for the 93rd district.
That's great.
What are the goals for the next few months on the campaign?
Doors, money, doors. Let's see. I think we'll probably also do a few doors.
All right. Meet everyone in the district.
I'm kidding. No, like so one of the really special things about the 93rd district, and one of the things that like my husband and I love about living here, is this is just a network of incredible small communities. Like this is a small town, but even on top of that, it's a town made up of small neighborhoods where people really know their neighbors. And so it's been an enormous pleasure to be able to go into those neighborhoods, and I try to do that with folks that live there and have them introduce me to their neighbors, right? And so it's just this successive experience of talking to neighbors and having them introduce me to their neighbors. And if you just look purely at this district, which is very walkable, that's the most efficient way for me to get to know voters here. We also have an incredible, and vibrant sort of farmers market. So you'll see me at the farmers market just about every Saturday between now and Election Day. And other community events, and certainly I'll be at those. But to date, I've been able to have probably the most substantive conversations when I walk up to someone's door and say, "Hi, I'm running for office. Can we talk about, what keeps you up at night? Can we talk about what you're excited about?" And then at the end of that conversation, me saying, "And may I have your vote on November 6th?"
Yeah, that's great. How many voters are you trying to contact between the start of the campaign and the end of the election? Can you share that kind of data with us? A lot of them. Okay.
Yeah.
I know you don't want to give away the farm on the strategy and stuff, but I'm curious,
Sure.
are we talking, does the district have 100,000 voters? Does it have 50? What number?
I'll give you give you the quick stats and just a note about these stats. One of the things that motivated me to run was that the numbers are small enough that I am going to be able to meet everybody. So
great.
We have 17,000 registered voters in the 93rd.
Oh my God. That's totally manageable.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, the last time the district lines were drawn was following on the 2010 census, right? And we are one of the fastest growing regions in the U.S. right now. So while the original boundary lines were drawn around an approximately 30,000 person district, my guess would be the actual district footprint is closer to 45, if not 50,000 people. And so then if you go back to there being less than 20,000 people registered, we have a pretty significant gap.
Yeah.
So we're actually running two campaigns. We're running a sort of quote unquote normal campaign with those voters that are registered, but then we're also running an aggressive voter registration campaign. Like I said earlier in our conversation, one of my metrics for success in this campaign is how many new voters can we get engaged and get registered to vote.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you could change one thing about the campaign right now, what would you change?
Time.
More of it?
Time.
Yeah.
If I could just be and then there were 4 more hours in the day.
If I could be in one place at once, that'd be great.
I would either change that there would suddenly be more time in the day or that I suddenly wouldn't need to sleep. Because it's basically the same trade-off.
Yeah.
But if I didn't actually need to sleep, we could get so much done.
Yeah. That's really funny. What's been the high point on the campaign so far?
I think the high point for me has been watching my kids begin to understand that I'm running. Now, mind you, my kids are 2 and 3, so the nuance of democracy is a little lost on them. And I do think at this point they basically think that a campaign means a lot more cupcakes than they are otherwise allowed to eat, and a lot more people taking a picture. But I think that my son pointed to my yard sign the other night as we were driving home, in somebody else's yard, and he went, "Look, Mommy, it's your friend."
So cute.
I just think the idea that my kids, even as toddlers, sort of understand that I am out there working to make our community stronger, and watching them begin to understand that, and even friends' kids, right, who are older, talking to my friend's 7-year-old daughter about what it means to run for office and what I would be able to do if elected, that is hands down the highlight of the campaign, because I know those kids will grow up to be engaged. And that's the heart and soul of what makes this country great, is that kind of engagement.
When you win, what is the first bill you're going to drop?
Okay. So thinking about why I'm running, and thinking about what I know families in Arkansas are going through right now, and how hard and how much harder it's gotten for folks just to support themselves, support their families, take care of their kids. Arkansas is one of the few states that does not yet have a state-based earned income tax credit. And if passed, an earned income tax credit at the state level would do exactly what it does at the federal level, which is allow working families to keep more of their income. I think it is critical that state policy enable and encourage people to be working and to be self-sufficient and to support themselves. But I also don't think that children whose parents are working full time should ever face challenges of poverty and should ever face going hungry or not being able to know or to care for health issues or have a place to live. So I think an earned income tax credit at the state level could go a long way to putting much needed resources back into families' bank accounts. That's
fantastic. What are the top 3 things that you love about your district, the mighty 93?
The mighty 93rd. Well, y'all have to come down and visit sometime, but this is truly one of the most incredible places in the United States. And I can say that as someone who's lived up in the Northwest. I've lived out in California. I've traveled a ton, and this is one of the most beautiful communities in the U.S. It's also a place where people really look out for each other. We know our neighbors know us, and I value so much that sense of community. And then I think the last thing that I love about the 93rd is that it has this enduring entrepreneurial spirit. And I think that this just comes from the fact that this town is where a major global corporation was created. But before it was a major corporation, it was an entrepreneur's idea. And it was an idea built into this massive company. And so I think the spirit of a lot of the ideas that Sam Walton had are alive and well in this community. And one of the things he used to say a lot that I have enjoyed repeating on this campaign is that we're better when we work together. He believes it. It's how he built his company, and I believe it, and it's how I'm trying to build my campaign. So this is a really incredible place, and I would invite you both to visit anytime.
We will.
Okay.
Maybe election night, victory night. Maybe we'll.
That sounds great.
We'll have a party.
Sounds great. You're
Save
welcome.
us the cupcakes.
You're welcome to come to the party.
They better have sprinkles on them. Cupcakes with sprinkles.
We have to let you get back to the campaign trail, and thank you so much for joining us today. Where can folks learn more about your campaign and get involved with you if they want to before the November election?
Yeah, we would welcome anyone to log on to agnewforus.com. That's Agnew, like the former vice president, AGNEW, forus.com.
Excellent.
Sweet.
Gayatri, thank you so much for joining us today. This was fantastic.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys.
Gayatri Agnew, thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Election University Podcast. Rainey, what'd you think?
She's awesome. I just have to give her a special shout out because the second we stopped recording and we were saying our goodbyes to her, Gayatri pointed out that she had taken time out of her call time this evening to record the podcast with us. And so she utilized that time by asking us both for a donation.
Yeah.
And that is like Campaign 101.
Yep.
Way to keep fundraising, Gayatri, and yes, of course, we will support you for your time.
Leaving $0 on the table.
Exactly.
Gayatri Agnew for the 93rd District in Arkansas. Thank you so much again for joining us. Listeners, what did you think? We would love to hear your feedback on episodes like this and other recent episodes. You can
should we do more? Should we talk to more candidates who are currently in their campaigns when maybe they can't share all of the nitty-gritty secrets of their field plans?
Right.
Or are we more interested in hearing people after the fact? I would like to know.
Yeah. We'll keep mixing it up. You tell us what you like, and we will make changes as needed. And while you're at it, hop on over to iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher.
All the places
where we are. And feel free to leave us a review. We love those 5-star reviews. But more importantly, we love hearing feedback from you. So you can email us directly at podcast@electionu.com. You can leave us a review. You can hit us up on our Facebook page.
I was going to say, talk to us on Facebook.
Yeah.
Talk to us on Twitter. We're there. We're waiting.
We're everywhere. We are everywhere.
Everywhere.
So, listeners, we will catch you next week. On behalf of Election University Podcast, I'm Jason Bennett.
And I'm Rainey Cohen.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. This week's episode has ended, but the campaign fund doesn't have to. Head on over to www.electionu.com, where you can access all of the links mentioned in today's episode, as well as the show notes. There you can also sign up for regular announcements or register for our campaign school. It's your very own online personal trainer for winning campaigns. www.electionu.com. Click, learn, win.